I overheard my son telling my wife, "Dad's becoming a burden. It's time to put him in a nursing home." I said nothing, but the next morning, they discovered I was gone along with documents that could change their lives. It's strange how life can shift beneath your feet in an instant. One minute you're living what you thought was a solid life. The next, you realize it's all been built on sand. Hell, I never saw it coming. I'm 58, still in decent shape despite the minor heart scare last month. Built my business from nothing but $2,000 and an old pickup truck 26 years ago. Started with small home repairs, then moved up to bigger projects. Now I employ 32 people, including my son, Kyler. My first wife, Diana, God rest her soul, was with me through the lean years. She stuck by me when we were eating ramen 3 nights a week, so I could put gas in that damn truck. When she passed from cancer 12 years ago, it nearly broke me. But I had Kyler to think about. He was 22 then, just finishing college. For 7 years, it was just me and my work. Then Vera came along. Met her at a friend's barbecue. She laughed at my terrible jokes, seemed interested in my stories. 53 years old now, still attractive, still gives me that smile that hooked me 5 years ago. Or at least, I thought she did. Last Tuesday changed everything. I'd been feeling tired lately. The doctor said it was nothing serious after that little episode last month, just needed to watch my diet, maybe ease up a bit. For crying out loud, I'm not even retirement age yet. I came home early that day, planning to surprise Vera with dinner reservations for our anniversary next week. I heard them before I saw them, Kyler's voice coming from the kitchen as I quietly entered through the garage. Something in his tone made me pause. I stood there in the hallway, keys still in my hand, as my son told my wife that I was becoming a burden, that my health issues were a perfect excuse to start looking into nursing homes, that they needed to talk to me about turning over control of the business to him before things got worse. And Vera agreed with him, said she'd been thinking the same thing, that it was getting to be too much to look after me. Look after me? Hell, I'd been at work since 6 a.m. that day, same as every other day for the past 3 decades. I didn't confront them. Something deep in my gut told me to wait, to listen more. So I silently backed out, got in my truck, and drove around for a couple hours. When I finally returned, I acted normal, tired from a long day, nothing unusual. But inside, I was dying. The 2 people I trusted most in this world were plotting against me. That night, I couldn't sleep. Vera snored softly beside me while I stared at the ceiling, replaying the last few years in my mind. All the little comments, the jokes about my age, Kyler's increased interest in the financial aspects of the business, Vera's questions about our retirement accounts, the paperwork I'd occasionally find moved in my home office. I'd been blind, or maybe I just hadn't wanted to see it. The next morning I called Jonah, my attorney. Known him since we were both starting out. Him with his law degree and me with my pickup truck. Told him I needed to see him urgently, but didn't want anyone to know. He agreed to meet me at a diner outside of town. Over coffee, I laid it all out. The conversation I'd overheard, my suspicions, the way Kyler had been positioning himself in the business, gradually taking over client relationships, how Vera had been encouraging me to add her name to more of my accounts, just in case something happens to you. Jonah listened quietly, taking notes. When I finished, he looked me straight in the eye and told me he'd had concerns himself, but hadn't wanted to overstep. Seems Kyler had contacted him a few weeks back, asking questions about the business succession plan, mentioning my declining health as a concern. Damn kid was working all the angles. We spent 3 hours at that diner, making plans. I had built everything from nothing, and I'd be damned if I was going to let them take it from me while I was still breathing. Over the next few days, I played along, mentioned feeling tired more often, let Kyler take the lead on a big meeting, asked Vera to help me organize some of my paperwork, since my eyes aren't what they used to be. All the while, I was watching them, the little glances they exchanged, the way conversations would stop when I entered a room. It made me sick to my stomach. I reached out to Walker, my friend of 30 years and business partner. He'd been semi-retired for a couple years, but still owned 20%. I trusted him with my life. We met for a fishing trip that Saturday. No phones, no interruption. When I told him what was happening, he didn't seem surprised, said he'd noticed something off about Kyler's attitude lately. The way he'd been talking about modernizing and new directions whenever Walker stopped by the office. That was all the confirmation I needed. The next week was a blur of secret meetings and careful planning. I'd leave the house claiming to visit clients but would actually be meeting with Jonah or the bank. I installed a small camera in my home office after accidentally leaving some financial statements on the desk. Sure enough, within 2 days, I had footage of both Kyler and Vera going through my files when they thought I wasn't home. The videos showed them discussing account numbers, property deeds, and the business valuation from last year. At one point, Vera actually said that, "Once we get him settled in a home, we'll have complete access." Kyler nodded, adding that he'd already found a suitable place about an hour away. Suitable! Like I was a piece of furniture that needed to be stored. For crying out loud, I built that business from nothing. I gave that boy everything, paid for his college, brought him into the company, taught him everything I knew. And this was how he repaid me, by conspiring with my wife to lock me away and take everything I'd worked for. I'm not a vengeful man by nature, but something in me hardened that day. Diana would be heartbroken to see what her son had become. I thought about all those late nights I'd worked while he was growing up, the vacations we'd postponed, the sacrifices we'd made, all so he could have a better life than I'd had. And this was my reward. I called my sister Elaine, who lives about 3 hours away. She and I have always been close, even more so after Diana passed. Without giving too many details, I asked if I could stay with her for a while. She didn't hesitate. That night, I waited until Vera was asleep. I'd been gathering essential documents for days, making copies, securing digital files. I had already quietly moved most of my personal belongings to a storage unit. All that remained was the final step. I left a single sheet of paper on the kitchen table. I heard everything. "Don't try to find me." That's all it said. By the time they woke up, I was already at Elaine's house, 3 hours away. I had taken every important document with me, the original business formation papers that showed sole ownership before Kyler joined, property deeds, insurance policies, bank statements, tax returns, everything they would need to try and take control. I'd also withdrawn a significant amount of cash from a personal account Vera didn't know about. My phone started blowing up around 7:30 a.m. First Vera, then Kyler. Text messages asking where I was, if I was okay. Then the tone changed. Demands to know what I meant by my note. Insistences that I was misunderstanding what I'd heard. By noon, there were voicemails with Vera crying, saying she was worried about me, that I wasn't thinking clearly. But I was thinking more clearly than I had in years. From the safety of Elaine's house, I sent one email to Walker. I told him to change the locks at the main office and suspend Kyler's access credential. Walker didn't ask questions. He just confirmed it would be done within the hour. Then I turned off my phone and helped Elaine make lunch. For the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe. The betrayal still cut deep. It probably always would. But now I had a plan, and they had no idea what was coming. Elaine didn't pry, but she's smart. She could see I was hurting. That evening, sitting on her back porch watching the sunset, she simply asked if I was okay. I told her I would be, that sometimes you have to tear everything down to rebuild it stronger. By the next morning, Kyler would have discovered his keycard didn't work. Vera would be realizing that her access to our main accounts had been restricted. And that was just the beginning. They wanted to call me a burden. They wanted to lock me away and take what I'd spent my life building. I'll tell you what, they were about to learn exactly who they were dealing with. This old man wasn't going down without a fight. And it was a fight they had no idea they'd started. Tomorrow would be the first day of my counterattack. As I settled into Elaine's guest room that night, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not just anger or hurt, but a cold, focused determination. They thought I was a problem to be managed, an obstacle to work around. They were about to discover I was so much more than that. I was the damn wall they would break themselves against, and I wasn't going to lose a minute of sleep over what was coming their way. Update 1. It's amazing how quickly people show their true colors when money's on the line. The morning after I disappeared, my phone had 27 missed calls and 42 text messages. I'd turned it back on briefly while drinking coffee with Elaine just to see the damage. Most of the messages started with concern. Was I okay? Where was I? They were worried sick. By afternoon, the tone had changed completely. Kyler was demanding to know where the business documents were. Vera wanted to know why she couldn't access our joint accounts. Funny how their concern for my well-being evaporated so damn quickly. I spent that first day at Elaine's setting everything in motion, called Jonah, and gave him the green light on our contingency plans. Had a long talk with Walker about the business operation, even reached out to my bank to confirm the security measures we'd put in place. Walker had already changed the locks and security codes at the main office as I'd asked. He'd told me Kyler showed up that morning, found his keycard deactivated, and threw a fit in the parking lot. The security cameras caught the whole thing. Not that I needed more evidence of his character, but it didn't hurt. Elaine was a godsend during all this. She didn't hover or ask too many questions, just made sure I ate regular meals and had a quiet place to make my calls. Around dinner time, she finally sat down across from me at her kitchen table with a concerned look. Said she'd been thinking about everything I'd told her, and she wasn't surprised. She'd never fully trusted Vera. Said there was always something calculated behind her smile. And Kyler, well, she'd noticed he'd become increasingly entitled over the years. Less of the good kid Diana and I had raised. More like someone who expected the world handed to him. For crying out loud, hearing that from my own sister was both validating and heartbreaking. Had I been that blind, or had I just wanted so badly to believe in my new wife and my only son that I'd ignored what was right in front of me? Day 2 brought the first real countermoves from them. Kyler tried to call an emergency meeting with our company's leadership team, claiming I was having serious health issues and needed to step back. Walker shut that down immediately. I'd already spoken with our core team, explaining I was taking some personal time but was fully in charge. Kyler didn't realize I'd been quietly recording our video calls from Elaine's house, documenting his increasingly desperate attempts to seize control. Around noon that day, Jonah sent me an interesting bit of information. He'd filed the paperwork to freeze the joint accounts I shared with Vera, citing suspicious activity. The bank's investigation revealed she'd been making regular transfers to a personal account I knew nothing about. Small amounts at first, then larger sums after my health scare. Almost $47,000 over the past few months. Money we'd saved together for our retirement, being siphoned away while she smiled to my face every day. I'll tell you what, finding out your wife is stealing from you should probably hurt more than it did. Maybe I was already numb from the initial betrayal, or maybe it just confirmed what I already knew deep down. Either way, it was another piece of evidence for the divorce proceedings Jonah was already preparing. That evening brought a surprising development. Megan, Kyler's wife, called me directly. I almost didn't answer, figuring Kyler had put her up to it, but something told me to take the chance. Turned out she was completely in the dark about what was happening. All Kyler had told her was that I'd had some kind of breakdown and disappeared. She was genuinely worried about me. I made a decision in that moment. Megan deserved to know who she was married to. I didn't rant or rage, just calmly explained what I'd overheard, what I'd discovered about their plan. Then I emailed her copies of the security footage showing Kyler and Vera going through my office, along with the audio where they discussed putting me in a home. There was a long silence on her end after that, then a quiet, "Thank you." She hung up without defending him. I figured that told me everything I needed to know about their marriage. By day 3, things were escalating. Walker called to tell me Kyler had shown up at the office with a locksmith, trying to gain access to my private files. The security system I'd upgraded 6 months ago captured everything on video. The locksmith left when Walker showed him documentation proving Kyler had no legal authority to access those records. Another piece of evidence for the growing pile. I spent most of that day reviewing the business structure with Jonah. Years ago, when I brought Kyler into the company, I'd been careful about how I set things up. He was an employee with a fancy title, not an owner. The only other person with actual ownership stake was Walker, with his 20%. The remaining 80% was all mine. Kyler had been pushing for ownership shares for years, but something had always held me back. Call it instinct or just plain luck. But that decision was now saving everything I'd built. Jonah helped me draft official termination papers for Kyler's employment, citing breach of trust and documented attempts to undermine company leadership. It wasn't a decision I took lightly. Firing your own son never is. But the business supported 32 families, not just mine. I couldn't let Kyler destroy what so many people depended on. While we worked, Vera started a new approach. She began calling everyone we knew, spinning a story about my mental health crisis, claimed I was paranoid, delusional, possibly dangerous to myself. I only found out because our neighbor called Elaine. They'd met at our wedding. He was genuinely concerned but also confused. I'd always seemed like one of the most level-headed guys he knew. This was a new low even for Vera. Using mental health as a weapon, trying to make people think I was crazy so she could potentially claim control of our assets? Hell, it was almost impressive how calculating she could be. Almost. By the end of the first week, their desperation was showing. The joint accounts remained frozen. Kyler's company credit cards were canceled. Vera discovered that the house, which she'd assumed was jointly owned, was actually still solely in my name. I'd never added her to the deed, another instinct that was paying off. Jonah confirmed she had no claim to it, meaning she would need to find somewhere else to live very soon. Meanwhile, I was starting to breathe again at Elaine's place. The initial shock had worn off, replaced by a cold, steady focus. Each morning, I'd have coffee on her back porch, watching the sunrise while fielding calls from Walker about business operations. We were managing fine without Kyler. Better, actually, according to some of the project managers who'd apparently been dealing with his entitled attitude for years. After 10 days, I decided it was time to make my first public appearance. Not back home, but at the main office. I drove in early, before most employees would arrive. Walker met me at the door, giving me a bear hug that nearly crushed my ribs. We spent an hour reviewing the company status before the team started arriving. The looks of relief on their faces when they saw me sitting in my office, I hadn't expected that, hadn't realized how many people genuinely cared. I held a brief meeting, explaining that I was dealing with some personal matters, but was very much in charge and healthy. Mentioned that Kyler would no longer be with the company, but gave no details. These people deserved stability, not gossip. Most nodded like they weren't surprised. A few even looked relieved. Seems my son's true nature hadn't been hidden from everyone. Later that day, I decided to drive by my house, our house, just to see if Vera was still there. Her car was in the driveway, along with a moving truck, so she'd gotten the message about the property situation. Through Jonah, I'd given her 2 weeks to vacate. Looked like she wasn't wasting time. I was about to drive away when I noticed Kyler's car pull up. He got out and stormed up to the door, clearly agitated. I watched from down the street as Vera let him in. Their body language, even from a distance, told me everything. They were fighting. The alliance was fracturing under pressure. For some reason, seeing that tension between them gave me more satisfaction than almost anything else so far. Two could play at the mental health game. I had Jonah deliver a formal letter to both of them, expressing deep concern about their apparent fixation on taking control of my assets while pushing for my institutionalization. Included clips from the recordings, security footage timestamps, and bank records showing Vera's theft. Suggested they might want to seek help for their troubling behavior. Petty? Maybe. Satisfying? Absolutely. The next day brought an unexpected complication. Kyler tried to access our client list and project files, apparently planning to start competing against us. Fortunately, our IT security caught the attempt and blocked it. Walker called me immediately, and we implemented the digital lockdown protocol we'd prepared. Another problem avoided thanks to advanced planning. That evening, Megan called again. She was leaving Kyler, said she'd suspected he was becoming money-obsessed, but had no idea how far he'd gone. The evidence I'd sent her was the final straw. She thanked me for opening her eyes before they had children together, asked if I'd be a reference for her as she looked for a new place to live. Of course, I said yes. None of this was her fault. She was just another victim of Kyler's greed. End of week 2 brought the formal divorce papers to Vera. Jonah had them delivered by courier, along with documentation of every penny she'd stolen from our accounts. The package also included notice that I would be pursuing full financial recovery unless she agreed to a clean, uncontested divorce with no claims on my business or personal assets. She had 48 hours to respond before we filed with evidence of financial misconduct. She called me sobbing within an hour. I let it go to voicemail, listened to her pleading that it was all a misunderstanding, that she loved me, that Kyler had manipulated her. The desperation in her voice might have moved me 2 weeks earlier. Now it just sounded like the death rattle of her plans falling apart. Meanwhile, documents were being drawn up to formalize Kyler's termination from the company, complete with copies of his attempts to undermine me, access confidential files, and spread lies about my health. The severance package I'd originally planned was replaced with a simple final paycheck and legal notice that any further attempts to damage the company would result in immediate legal action. I decided to return home the following week. Vera would be gone by then. According to the legal timeline, Walker and a few trusted employees had already installed new security systems at the house and changed all the locks. They'd also swept for any surveillance equipment Vera might have left behind. Paranoid? Maybe. But recent events had taught me that caution was warranted. The night before I planned to return home, I sat with Elaine on her porch one last time. She asked if I regretted any of this, not the protection of my assets, but the complete severing of ties with my own son. I had to think about that one. The truth was complicated. I regretted that it had come to this. Regretted not seeing who Kyler had become sooner. But my actions since discovering their betrayal? No. No regrets there. Elaine nodded like she understood. Said Diana would be heartbroken about Kyler, but proud of me for standing my ground. That meant more to me than she could know. The next morning, Jonah called with news. Vera had signed the divorce agreement, accepting all terms. She knew she was caught and was cutting her losses. Kyler, on the other hand, was threatening to challenge his termination, claimed he had evidence of me mismanaging the company. It was a bluff, we both knew it, but his desperation was getting dangerous. I packed my bags in Elaine's guest room, feeling a strange mix of emotions. The hurt was still there, probably always would be, but something else had grown alongside it. A sense of clarity, I guess, about who I could trust, about what mattered, about standing up for myself when people tried to take advantage. As I loaded my truck, I received one final text from Vera. "You've ruined everything. I hope you're satisfied." I was, but I wasn't finished yet. Not by a long shot. The counterattack had gone exactly as planned. The divorce was proceeding. My business was secure. My home would be mine again by nightfall. But there was still one major piece left to implement, the complete restructuring of my will and estate plan. Kyler needed to understand that his actions had permanent consequences, and I had an appointment with Jonah the next day to make that abundantly clear. For crying out loud, they'd tried to lock me away and take everything I'd built. Did they really think I'd go quietly? The next phase would show them exactly how wrong they'd been about this burden they'd tried to discard. And somewhere deep down, I almost hoped they'd try to fight back because I was just getting started. Update 2. There's something almost peaceful about coming home to an empty house that was once filled with lies. Walking through my front door after Vera had moved out, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The house smelled different, her perfume gone, replaced by the faint scent of cleaning product. Walker's team had done a thorough job preparing for my return. New locks, security system upgraded, and not a trace of Vera's belongings remained. Just my stuff, arranged exactly as I liked it. For the first time in weeks, I slept in my own bed, soundly, without the snake beside me. Morning coffee on my own patio never tasted so damn good. The first week back was about re-establishing routines, back to the office every day, checking in with project managers, reviewing the books. The business hadn't missed a beat during my absence. If anything, projects were running smoother without Kyler's interference. Several employees quietly mentioned how the workplace atmosphere had improved. No surprise there. I met with Jonah 3 days after my return to finalize the changes to my will and estate plan. The meeting took nearly 5 hours as we meticulously restructured everything I'd built over my lifetime. Diana and I had originally set things up for Kyler to inherit the business and most of our assets. Now, that was completely off the table. Instead, we created a complex trust structure. 40% of the company would go to Walker upon my death, with another 40% distributed among long-term employees through an employee stock ownership plan. The remaining 20% would fund a scholarship for young people entering the trades, named after Diana, of course. The house and personal assets would be divided between Elaine and several charities Diana had supported during her life. Kyler's name didn't appear once in the entire document. Not a single penny, not a single share, not a stick of furniture. As if he'd never existed. For crying out loud, it was the hardest and easiest decision I'd ever made all at once. Hard because what father wants to disinherit his only son? Easy because he'd shown exactly who he was, and I believed him. While these changes were being finalized, interesting information about Vera started surfacing. Jonah's background investigation revealed she'd been married twice before me, something she'd never mentioned. The first marriage ended when her husband caught her embezzling from his dental practice. The second, to a widower like me, ended with her attempting almost exactly the same nursing home scheme. The man had caught on faster than I had, but she'd still walked away with a hefty settlement. I'd married a professional predator without even knowing it. Jonah filed this information with the divorce court, ensuring she wouldn't see another dime from me. He also advised warning Kyler, on the off chance he wasn't aware of Vera's history. I considered it. For about 5 seconds, Kyler had made his choice. Let him discover who his partner in crime really was on his own. About 10 days after my return, the divorce was finalized in record time. Vera's theft made it an open and shut case. She walked away with nothing but the belongings she'd brought into the marriage. Her final attempt to contest it fell apart when Jonah presented the recordings and bank records. The judge wasn't impressed with her crocodile tears. That same week, I received a certified letter from some ambulance chaser Kyler had hired. They were threatening a wrongful termination suit, claiming I'd fired him due to family disagreements rather than work performance. I forwarded it to Jonah, who responded with our mountain of evidence: the security footage, Kyler's unauthorized access attempts, his lies about my health to clients and staff. We never heard from that attorney again. Kyler, however, was just getting started. He began calling our clients directly, claiming he was starting his own company and could offer better service. A desperate move that backfired spectacularly. Most clients called me immediately to report these contacts. I didn't have to do anything. His own tactics were burning every bridge he had in the industry. I'll tell you what, watching someone self-destruct while you simply step aside is a special kind of satisfaction. The real estate agent handling the sale of Kyler and Megan's house called me about 3 weeks after my return home. Apparently, Megan had given her my number as a contact. The house wasn't selling as quickly as they needed, and Megan was struggling to find affordable accommodations for herself. Without hesitation, I offered one of my rental properties to her at half the market rate. She wasn't responsible for Kyler's action, and Diana would have wanted me to help her. That decision turned out to be more consequential than I expected. During the move, Megan discovered financial documents Kyler had hidden from her, evidence that he'd been gambling away their savings for months. Nearly $30,000 gone on sports betting and online poker. No wonder he'd been so desperate to get his hands on my business. Megan shared this information with me during a coffee meeting where she'd intended to thank me for the rental property. I suggested she share it with her divorce attorney immediately. The look of determination that came over her face reminded me of Diana. She'd be all right. Meanwhile, Vera had relocated to a small apartment across town. Through mutual acquaintances, I learned she was struggling to find employment. Seems her previous job references weren't holding up to scrutiny after Jonah's investigation revealed her pattern of financial exploitation. She'd applied to work at 3 different financial institutions, all of which turned her down after background checks. Karma working overtime. About a month after my return, Walker discovered something particularly satisfying. Kyler and Vera were still in contact, apparently planning to combine forces once they'd each secured whatever assets they could from their respective divorces. Not only were they conspiring, but they'd started a romantic relationship. The betrayal had layers I hadn't even imagined. This discovery gave me an idea. I asked Jonah to forward the complete dossier on Vera's history to Kyler's divorce attorney. Anonymously, of course, just enough information to make him realize who he'd aligned himself with. Let him worry about whether she was playing him too. By the 2-month mark, the consequences were fully cascading. Kyler's attempted new business venture failed to launch when he couldn't secure startup funding. No bank would touch him after his termination, and the evidence of his gambling habits became part of his divorce proceeding. The house he'd shared with Megan sold for well below asking price, with most proceeds going to cover their outstanding debts. Vera wasn't faring any better. She'd begun telling mutual friends that I was abusive, trying to salvage her reputation. These attempts stopped abruptly after Jonah sent cease and desist letters threatening defamation suits, complete with our evidence package. Last I heard, she was working as a saleswoman at a clothing store in the mall, quite a step down from the lifestyle she'd become accustomed to. I took particular satisfaction in removing all photos of Kyler and Vera from my home, replaced them with pictures of Diana, Elaine, Walker, and the company team, people who'd proven their loyalty. The house felt cleaner somehow, unburdened by their presence, even in photograph form. Sometime around the 3-month mark, Kyler made his first attempt at reconciliation, not because he was sorry, mind you, but because he was desperate. The text came late one night, a rambling message about how he'd been influenced by Vera, how he'd made a terrible mistake, how he wanted to make amends. He needed money, of course, medical bills, he claimed, though I suspected gambling debts. I didn't respond, blocked his number instead. The next day, he showed up at the office. Security stopped him in the lobby exactly as instructed. Walker called me immediately, and I watched on the security cameras as my son, looking disheveled and thin, argued with the front desk. He left after being informed that police would be called if he didn't leave voluntarily. The entire incident was documented and added to our file. That evening, I sat on my patio watching the sunset, reflecting on how quickly a life can unravel when built on greed. Kyler had been raised with everything: love, opportunity, security. He'd had a mother who adored him, and a father who worked himself to the bone to provide for him. And he'd thrown it all away for a quick payday. For crying out loud, I'd have given him the damn company eventually if he'd just been patient and honest. That was always the plan Diana and I had made. But he couldn't wait, and now he'd never have any of it. 4 months after the initial betrayal, I received an unexpected visitor. Elaine had driven down unannounced, concerned about how I was really doing beneath the veneer of business as usual. She's always been able to see through me, even when I thought I was hiding things well. We sat at my kitchen table like we used to as kids, drinking coffee and talking honestly. She asked if I ever intended to forgive Kyler. The question hit me harder than I expected. The truth was simple but painful. No. Some betrayals run too deep for forgiveness. I could acknowledge he was my son, that I'd once loved him completely, but that didn't obligate me to welcome him back into my life after what he'd done. Elaine nodded, understanding without judgment. She handed me an envelope, information about Kyler she'd gathered through her own connection. He'd moved to a studio apartment in a bad part of town, was working as a laborer for a competing company at a fraction of his former salary, was seeing Vera regularly, though their relationship seemed volatile according to neighbors. I took the envelope but didn't open it further. Didn't need to. Knowledge of their struggle was enough. The 6-month mark brought the final piece of my reckoning plan. I established a substantial donation to an elder abuse prevention organization, creating an annual awareness campaign. The first public announcement of this donation prominently featured the names of Kyler and Vera as inspirations for the initiative. Their attempted exploitation of me would now be permanently attached to their names in a very public way, documented for anyone who might Google them in the future. Petty? Maybe. Effective? Absolutely. By the 8-month mark, my new normal was firmly established. The business was thriving. I'd promoted several long-term employees to fill the gap left by Kyler, discovering talent that had been overshadowed by his presence. Walker was more involved again, bringing his experience back to daily operations. Elaine visited regularly. Even Megan had found her footing, returning to school to finish her degree while living in my rental property. The house felt like home again, purged of lies and betrayal. I received one final communication from Kyler around the 9-month mark, a handwritten letter delivered to the office. In it, he claimed to have hit rock bottom, lost everything, realized his mistakes, said he was attending gambling addiction meetings, asked for nothing but forgiveness, claiming to understand that our relationship could never be repaired. I read it once, then fed it into the paper shredder. Some might call that heartless. Maybe it was. But I'd given that boy every chance, every advantage, every opportunity. He'd chosen to throw it all away in pursuit of my assets. He'd conspired with my wife to lock me away. He'd been willing to destroy everything I'd built and everyone who depended on me for a paycheck, all to satisfy his own greed. Actions have consequences. His actions, his consequences. The final act of my reckoning came at the 1-year mark of that fateful day when I'd overheard their plans. I invited Walker, Elaine, several key employees and their families to my home for a barbecue. As we gathered on the patio where I'd once stood unseen listening to my son's betrayal, I announced my new 5-year plan for the company: expansion into new markets, increased benefits for employees, the formal establishment of the employee ownership program that would eventually distribute 40% of the company among the team, the future being built without Kyler or Vera in it. Later that evening, after everyone had gone home, I sat alone on the patio with a glass of Diana's favorite wine. Somewhere across town, Kyler and Vera were living with the consequences of their actions. No inheritance, no comfortable future, no security, just exactly what they'd tried to take from me. Hell, they wanted to call me a burden. Now they were carrying their own. And I didn't lose a single night's sleep over any of it.